Hello and welcome back to the Angelati studio. I'm joined now by Alain Bollack. Alain, welcome back, old friend of Angelati, and you did a presentation today in the conference, and you know, some of what you were discussing is about the business issues around smart metering and smart grid. What were some of the points that were coming up in that?
There are many different points. We observe a big push towards smart metering because, especially in Europe, because the regulatory regime is very clear, and it's very clear to the utilities. We know what needs to be done, by when and how. So utilities are doing it. One of the point I was making this morning is the regulatory regime for smart grid doesn't exist, or doesn't exist clearly enough for the utilities to invest properly into large investment in smart grid.
And it's one of those things where, so it must be a business case driven investment rather than, because when the regulator says do this, everybody goes, oh, okay, I got to do it. Or,
okay, when I say the regulator it's not the regulator need to say to do this, it's the regulator should enable it.
Right.
So the big point is how you guarantee the return on investment. So we're asking utilities to do a different kind of investment, or distribution company to do a very different kind of investment. So it's not more copper in the ground, is optimizing, and it's very hard then to get the return on that investment. So we need to change the remuneration model for the distribution companies, or include that new kind of investment in the remuneration model, so the distribution companies can go back to their investors and say, Mr. Chinese, if they are Chinese investors, or Mr. Spanish, if they're Spanish investors, I can explain my case, I can explain why we need to invest it, not because the regulators say so, but because there is a return, and I know how I'm going to get a return bottom line to my business.
And what does that return look like? I mean, how are these business cases being built and stacked up?
So if you look at how distribution companies are paid at the moment, they're paid based on the return of the copper they put on the ground. Here you need to find some ways to include innovation, include new technology you put in place, and recognize that in the investment, so the utilities can get a return. So maybe if you take one step behind, or further up, you're saying is agreeing what is the objective for the utilities, what they need to achieve. So energy losses, efficiency, cost reduction, whatever they are all of that obviously, is ensuring they are clear for the utilities, and they can put their case of how they want to achieve this objective, their plan, their investment, agreed by the regulator, and they can do and implement and get the return on it.
And
I'm oversimplifying, obviously, because it doesn't.
So I'm going to dive into this return piece. So I'm a distribution network. I'm going right. Okay, I need to do something with my distribution network because I'm getting renewables that are coming in, and that's one of the drivers. And so I know I need to do this to provide a reliable grid. Otherwise, I can't connect this up. It'll blow the grid. What are the economics though? Because who pays whom where?
The grid is the backbone.
Right.
So the backbone needs to work, and we need to find a way to pay for it. So it's nice to say to the generation guys, yeah, do as much renewables as you want, but if you can't integrate it, it won't work. That's pretty simple. And if there's no way to finance that investment, who's going to do it? So you need to find a way to say to the utilities, to the distribution companies, there's a big renewable farm somewhere on the east coast or somewhere, need to connect it to the grid, I need to be paid for that.
And that payment would manifest itself how? The generator would pay the distribution utility?
Okay. So there's different ways you can imagine that. There's different ways. I'm not sure I've got the definitive answer, and I'm sure that people thinking of the model is either you pay for the cost of build and plus maintenance, specifically for that network that you build, or that extension line, or you do a more holistic share of the cost. I think that every regulator will have a different opinion, depend on the scale, depend on the complexity. I don't think we should recommend A or B, and there may be also ways of making these two models work together.
And in your opinion, how important is it for us to get this solved? Because it strikes me as a commentator on this, is like unless we get the distribution and transmission grid fit for purpose, as you said earlier, you can have as many windmills as you like.
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
We've seen in other part of the world where the urgency, when there's an urgency, there's a solution. So clearly we haven't reached the urgency yet. So if I was thinking California, when there was not enough capacity in the network, demand response took off pretty very quickly in California because there's a need. There was not enough capacity. If you were not implementing demand response, there will be more and more blackout. So demand response was implemented very quickly. Now, when we're going to have investors, I would think investors may stop investing in renewables, and we've seen that already. I think we need to have that a pure consultancy word, that burning platform to create the need for both the regulator and the distribution to find an agreement on how to do it.
It almost needs to break before people realize that.
Well, just before breaking, yes.
Just before breaking.
It's the best way to bring people to the table.
It gets people's attention, right?
Normally, yes. And the right people.
Now, going back to some of the other topics that you were discussing in your presentation about, smart metering and smart grid and so on, and I want to explore the point where, so, all of the smart metering is coming on, this smart grid is being thought about, or is there in some cases, but everybody's saying that the utility business model needs to change, right? We need to change the business model. The utilities need to change their business model. This is like, it's almost like Groundhog Day. Everybody's saying that. Yeah. But when I ask them the question, well, what to?
Okay. Right? We can't say utility as a one word.
Yes.
Utility is made of different type of business. So in some part of the world, these utilities are fully integrated, from distribution to retail. In most countries, it's unbundled, or especially in Europe, but that's what we want to achieve. So changing the business model is where. We need to figure out where. So smart grid, distribution company, I think that's what we just talked about, is find a way for distribution company to do the right investment so they can integrate renewables, grid, improve the efficiency, reduce the losses, and so on and so forth. That's not a change of business model, that's a change of remuneration model. I don't think it's much more than that, to be honest. Yeah. I'm not saying it's simple, but I don't think it's much more than that. Now, when we talk about change of business model, we're thinking more, in my view, on the retail side. And indeed, we have the debate around, there was a very good discussion yesterday in the plenary around, is it an evolution or a revolution, okay? It depends where you sit on the table. I think there is a big difference, big difference between telco and utilities. If you don't have your mobile phone, if your mobile phone doesn't work for an hour, or even a day, you can live without. Utilities, you can kill people. So it's not like Nest will come and replace that.
Well, that's always one of the things that I sort of struggle with, just from a common sense perspective. So there was one commentator on, I think, one of our webinars who said, the utilities will not make money selling electricity. And I was like going, wow, okay, so this is the electric retail side. That's like, okay, that's interesting. So where are they going to make their money? Because one of his points was there is such a pressure from a political standpoint that the margins will always be the margins and may even be forced to reduce. So
that's why we call it a commodity, by the way.
Yeah.
And it is a utility. Electricity is a commodity. I think when we talk about change of business model, to come back to your question, I think is there is money on the table. There is more money to make, and it will be hard for the utilities who have for years or centuries putting the network in place, putting the infrastructure in place, putting smart meter in place, and doing the cost and having all the costs of the meters and so on, and not getting the benefit of it. So when we talk about smart home or whatever technology in the home, or energy efficiency measures, or thermostat measurement and stuff like that, and not having the revenue of that would be very frustrating, I think. That's what. So how you capture that? How you capture that revenue?
So how are people going about capturing that revenue? Because there's an argument that says actually the people who will win the energy retail space are retailers in the UK, people like Sainsbury's and stuff like that, who are used to retailing stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, not the utility. And again, we have to be careful about using that
Sure,
word.
sure.
Here is, so, can you just sort of bring to life where a utility energy retailer is starting to win back some of that?
I think that's where we see a lot of programs of 2 points. One, we shouldn't extrapolate the UK with the rest of Europe. So
it's quite unique.
It's very different. So
Yeah.
the UK, where the lack of trust, competition creating big issues and so on and so forth, it's quite unique. So if you take, not to name it, but EDF, the image of EDF as energy in the UK compared to EDF in France is completely different. So EDF Energy is amongst all the other utilities have a bad image like all the other utilities in the UK. EDF in France is the best brand in the country. Okay, people want to work there, they love what they do, and so on and so forth. So we shouldn't extrapolate the issue. I don't remember the question.
The question is about the business models. Again, from the retail side, and you're making the point that the UK is unique.
So the point in places where the issue is predominant, like the UK, that's the utility are doing the right thing. Is back to basics. Is rebuilding that trust, building that confidence, rebuilding that relationship. If you don't have that basics, you can do whatever you want. You can introduce new products, new solutions, new services, new tariff, what you want to call it. It will fail. It will fail until the trust is rebuilt. And the trust is no more than a good customer service, delivering what you promised, having the right intent, but delivering on your intent. That's what it is.
Maybe.
And there are programs. E.ON is doing very well in that. You name it. In fact, all the big six in the UK. If we go back to the UK, are all having a program on what sort or another to rebuild that customer trust.
Maybe this is why I feel like I'm not getting the right answer, because actually the answer is quite simple. It's to a point. Is a new business model. It's new business model for the utilities, but it's not a new business model to the world. There's people who've been doing retailing and building trust and all that sort of stuff.
There is space for innovation, plenty of space for innovation, because when you start having a client who is aware of what he does, he's generating his own electricity, he's part of a microgrid or of a community, he's doing his own efficiencies measures. We're still a bit in a dream world here. Okay, it's not completely science fiction because it's happening, but it's not large scale. So you need to prepare for that. So in the world where the consumer is doing all that, there's a real consumer. Then yes, we need to be creative and create new value proposition. Absolutely. And that's where I think people talk about change of business model.
Yeah.
Because the utilities are not ready for that.
Yeah.
They don't have the skills, they don't have the experience, they don't have the people. They don't have the experience, skills and people. Yeah. System also, they don't have the system for that either.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a danger that, because a lot of this, one of the previous interviews today, they said there is a moment in time opportunity to capitalize on that, and if you don't, someone else will. Whether that's my mobile phone company or whatever, or someone like Sainsbury's and things like that. Do you think there's a danger that this industry may be missing the moment in time opportunity?
I think it's less. I don't think so.
Right.
To be very frank, it's important to create pressure and to say it's happening now. Let's do it now. But it's talk at nice conferences. The panic is not yet reached some of the board. We've seen some board, in fact, who are really, really panicked. But they are because primarily they're starting to lose money and they see their revenue going down on an ongoing basis. So it's normal KPIs if who are really making the move or pushing them to do the move.
And then to sort of finish off again with the in your talk, you're talking about smart grids and application of technology, but again, you were making an assertion that we need to move up the stack in terms of involving that
Sure.
technology conversation. So we need to include more of the business leaders rather than leaving it to the engineers. Can you just explain a little bit about the issue there?
The case I'm making is if you leave, there's a disconnection here. We can't say on one hand it's fundamental, it's the transformation of the business, and leaving it to the specialist, which is the case. It is people who understand the electrons, how they go from A to B, and the connection in the network, and so on and so forth. They are not the right people who take the decision from a big investment perspective. What I'm arguing is you need to go a few levels up in the organization. It needs to be a board decision, and the board may not understand all the different technology and the technicity of this stuff, and they don't need to. They need to understand the business. So we need to transform the smart grid debate from a technical angle to a business angle, and then take the right decision at board level, organizing then the companies to mobilize the right stakeholders and engaging in the implementation of the solution. But it can't be just bottom up from the technology on upwards. You need to go top down. I've seen CEO telling me, explain me what smart grid is all about. I don't know. And they can't ask the people inside, like organization, because they feel they look stupid.
That's interesting.
So we need to have a business discussion, not a technical discussion.
And it's quite fascinating to hear that, because at the end of the day, the technology, in this case, the technology is driving the business, but that strikes me as like a fundamental disconnect, because someone could be building stuff that doesn't enable you to go in the direction the business needs to go.
Absolutely, and there's lots of disconnection between investment and drivers, and it could be a pet project by, I'm exaggerating here a little bit, but it could be a pet project from an engineer who has been there 30, 40 years, who know exactly how to manipulate the process within the organization, say, that technology good enough, let's do and implement it. And he will have a proper case and so on. But is that aligned with what the strategy of the organization? It can't be decided down the chain. It needs to be decided at the top.
And so just where we finish off, does that mean we need a new type of person in that management layer that can translate technology to business and
I don't think so. No, not necessarily. It's probably the leadership need to ask the right question, need to ask the business question, and ask again, saying, why are we doing that? I know what I need to achieve. I know what either the regulator is going to tell me to do, or penalize me because I'm not efficient, because I'm not reliable, because I've got outages, because whatever, or the regulator going to, as I said, incentivize or penalize me as an organization. That needs to be translated from the top to the bottom, and vice versa. It needs to be translated up to the organization.
And
so it's a translation.
It's a translation.
I don't think it's a new job or a new responsibility.
Final question, because you've had the luxury of being in the conference the whole time. Is there anything that you'd kind of pick out as that was a great discussion? That was a great thing that's kind of come out for the industry.
We've seen the traditional evolution versus revolution. I think the debate is finally landing on utilities different than telecom. So it's not so easy to it's not going to be easy to disintermediate the utility sector as the telco has been done, the music industry as we use as examples all the time, potentially banking as we've seen 10, 15 years ago, and not so disintermediate the same way either. The utilities are here to stay. I'm not saying they're all going to stay. There will be merger, there will be some dying and some surviving better than others. But it's not going to be easy for new entrants to say, "Oh, I'm going to do the grid." There's no new technology that's going to replace the grid.
Exactly,
the grid is there.
Exactly. So, well, that's a great thing to leave it on, because it's always been one of those frustrating analogies where the telco sector is the same as it's not. It's not. So
I think that was clearly articulated yesterday in some of the conferences, and I fully support that.
Perfect. You've given me a great link, Alain, as ever. So thank you for watching this interview. I hope you enjoyed it. And those presentations that Alain alluded to, they're actually on Engerati. So if you head on over to the relevant section on Engerati, you can watch all of those great discussions as well. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you.